So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for March 12th, 2021. We'll follow our standard approach, which is to look at what we've tagged for milestone 11. Before we do that, I don't know if anybody has any announcements that they'd like to share. Okay, if not, then I'm going to pull up the issues in milestone 11, and then I will share my screen. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so top of the list was renaming NAPI to something more appropriate and descriptive. I think, Jim, you've been pushing a number of those forward. So do you have an update there?
I don't. I've not had a lot of spare cycles the last couple of weeks. The one thing, my next priority is the what we call the NAPI resource, the tutorial website.
Right.
For some reason, that did not get updated, so that's the next on my list.
Okay. Should we add that to this?
Somewhere
so we just don't forget. But
let's add it to that list, maybe above the build tools heading.
Okay.
That's a great idea, Michael.
Sure. So just docs. So this is, I'll copy since I always get this wrong.
Yeah.
What about Node.js examples?
Yeah, I think I'd see. It's the example site that has the resource, and somehow my edits hit the README page, but not the tutorial site.
Yeah, but the folder that we named in the example, because under every folder we have an -API. Do we need to rename that folder? Oh,
right.
No.
Yeah, I'm afraid that might break a bunch of links if we did that, right? Because we do refer to these examples a lot. So
right.
I don't know. Can we make like a symlink maybe? Does you know?
I think we agreed we wouldn't change things that were going to break stuff like that. So I think we'd probably be okay leaving that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think Jim had changed a number of things, like in here, right? Like in the docs and stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
After all, we do have NaN stuff in there, so you know, if anything is historical, then this repo is, right? So
I think it's just, we made that general thing. We'll spell out any Node API in most places so that that's what people think, but we won't break things like we're not changing the API method calls or the.
Yeah.
I think this falls into that category if we think there'll be existing links.
Maybe we can do with that any new additional examples go into a Node API folder.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So where the resource should be, right? This part, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just put that link in the. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Right. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, that sounds good. Thanks for continuing to look at that. Blog post about transition to Node API. So
I sent an email to everyone by Google Docs, but yeah, I can share the link of the document on the chat. And
yeah, is there any issue with putting that into the issue itself?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, is there? I don't think there'll be anything sensitive or anything in there, right? So it might make sense.
Okay, so I can. Okay.
I can add it right now. I'm right there, so I can just add it. Like, here is the doc.
It's not world writable, right? It's just shared among us.
Yeah. Only you can edit the document.
Okay, but it is world visible, right? So that's good.
Yeah, I don't see that there's a concern with that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if Jack's going to contribute, maybe add him as well. Share it with him as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, just Jack, send me the email,
Okay.
and I can add you as editor.
Okay, thanks.
That is a question. I don't know, Jim, did you share all of our emails with Jack?
You can just put it on the chat.
Right. No, I'm just thinking though that like that would be a good thing to do. Just have an email that says, Jack, here's our email, so that he can reach out to us between calls. Okay, so the next thing is stale issues. So let's take a quick look at the stale issues going backwards. So I didn't add any new ones since last time. Let's see. This one, I guess we're just waiting on to see if there's a PR.
I opened a pull request.
Okay.
For 258, the issue 258.
This one. Okay, this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you, we discussed it last week, and I added some paragraph to explain what happens if you use this factory method.
Okay, and that basically would close out that issue.
Yeah, we can close the issue through this paragraph.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks. That looks good to me. And so fixes 2. Okay, so that should actually close that one out. So perfect. Okay, good. That's basically everything we had on the list then. So okay, well that's great. Tracking issues for modules that we've noticed porting. I guess nothing new there, but we usually do take a quick look at just to see how adoption is going.
Yeah, 4 million.
4 million. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. That's nice. Still seems to be on the good track of being used more and more. So that's good. Okay. Review external examples. I know I haven't enabled debug testing for add-ons. So that takes us to issues that are raised by module owners or in the node repo. Is there particular ones that people want to jump to first?
I'd eventually like to talk about the reference handling change that I've got going with Lucas.
Right.
If we want to talk, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should talk about other things first.
You think that one
may
will take
tail off? Yeah.
Okay, sure. Because that is definitely one I wanted to talk about too, though. So node. Okay. Any other sort of new issues or outstanding things that are top of people's minds? This one, I think, I'm going to go ahead and land today unless anybody has any concerns.
Yeah, I took a look, and for me it's good because I wrote the reason that pushed me to approve. I think that using is more readable, and you can template the alias. So yeah, I like these podcasts.
Okay. Okay.
Is this gonna break anybody with an old compiler, or are old compilers so old that they wouldn't work anyway?
But I think using is there since the C++ 11. So this is the only thing that I don't know what.
So it's okay. It's a C++
report.
11 feature.
Yeah, it's C++ 11 free. See, yes.
Right. So I think all compilers. So it's. I think when we looked here, so if using. That was the question I tried to ask, but maybe I didn't ask it the right way. Is that like I wanted to make sure, yeah, that like our older compilers like GCC 6 will still support this.
Yeah, we should see what the oldest compiler is that we support in the project. I think it's 6, right? So I don't know, maybe make a VM with like Ubuntu 16.04 or something and see if it still works, and it should.
Well, our basically running this against our matrix should cover that, right?
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So you mean like on CI? Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
Because yeah, I thought I'd answered that question but I'm actually not so sure anymore.
Okay, well, it's got to go through CI
Yeah.
anyway in order to land. So then we'll know then.
It's 11, yeah. I guess C++ 11 is 2011.
Ish, probably, yeah. So it's been around.
Yeah, so let me just. Yeah, so it's like actually I'm looking at something like C++ 11 support and GCC 4.8 experimental support, but.
And then I'm
Okay.
looking at the building doc in the node repo.
Yeah.
And for 10, it's GCC 4.9.
4.9, right? Yep. So okay. So if we actually run and it passes on 10, we're probably good.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. That's good. Good point. I guess I asked the question, will it break any existing code? And the answer was no. But yeah, whether the features support it was another good question. I don't know if any others of people here want to talk.
I have one that the issue is submitted very long ago, but I have submitted a PR on the node add-on API repo.
Okay.
And WHC 927.
Okay.
Yeah. So currently the function calls in node add-on API returns a NAPI value, and if the C++ exceptions are disabled, and there is a JavaScript exceptions thrown while the NAPI function calls, then the NAPI function call will still return a NAPI value, but the NAPI value is a empty one. And there is no compiler checks around the return values. So and we have to using, like, say, NAPI env get pending exceptions to each NAPI function call. And I have made a change. This is a demo that similar to V8 maybe, so that we can facilitate compiler checks around the return value to safely ensure the function code does return a value. So it brings a strong guarantees to when the C++ exceptions were disabled.
Right. So now is this something where like it's breaking and that's why you have the like the opt-in?
Currently the behavior will only be changed while we define the node add-on API enable maybe.
Right.
So if we are not define the macro, then nothing will be changed. And if we define the node add-on API enable maybe, then the return value type of function reference call or function call of in node add-on API will be changed to maybe of NAP value. So
Is
that
it
we
only
have to,
these functions that like doing that makes sense?
currently I have only playing around the function code, so it's a draft that I would like people to review it, and if it makes sense, I would like to explore if there is any other API that does make sense with maybe return value.
Right. Now, does it change the code? Like I see the return type's different. How is the code itself different?
The function signature isn't being changed since we didn't change the parameters.
Right, but the return value is different. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to define use a macro to switch it on or off.
I just trying to understand, like, say this one is function call.
You can scroll down to the test case so that we can see how we can facilitate the features.
Right.
It's in the bottom, I believe.
Sorry. Okay. Right.
Yeah. The above one, the C++ file. Yeah, this one.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have to check it explicitly in our code when C++ exceptions are disabled, so we can ensure that either we are check it with the fit if the value is empty, and it will be crash with fatal error, or we can check it with a return value to determine if the value exists. So we can handle the exceptions programmatically, or we just I'm doing the simple way. So if the value is empty, so let it crash, and our code will be cleaner. But that's up to the developers. But this introduced a compiler checks around the return values, so it can be much more safer.
Right. In terms of the function,
I've got a question then. Look back at the test case. Since you still have to call it.check, how is that different than just having a normal value and then adding some method on value that's like throw if empty?
The difference is that if we return a empty NAPI value, and we using the return value with the other node add-on API or node add-on API, then the compiler will not complain that this value is maybe empty. And if we wrap it with a maybe box, then if we don't check it, the compiler will complain, and we will not compile the code.
So then does that mean in the places where we require a value to exist, we would use value, and then anywhere where it could be empty, we have to switch it to maybe value?
I think it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite way, right? It's in the places where the value must not be empty that you add a maybe, because if it must not be empty and yet it may be empty because of an exception, then you have to use a maybe, right?
Gotcha.
But if it's okay to be empty, then, well, you don't need a maybe, right? Because it doesn't matter if it's empty or not. The code is able to handle it.
I guess the difference might be, like, normally you would check for exceptions after making that call, right?
I don't think most people will be aware of that if they are writing the code and there is nothing since there is no test case for their code, and they might be ignoring it since there's nothing complaining about that.
But today that would be the right thing to do, right?
Yeah,
like there should be a check that says
the PR, the compiler throw will not compile if you if the developer don't check.
Right. That's what was my next thing was like today we would, you know, to do it right, you should have a is exception pending. If so, do the right thing. But the difference with this is that it forces the check. Like the compiler will help enforce the check.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. A weaker solution might be to just document for each method that we have that this method may throw an exception and therefore the return value may be empty. But that's still that's a documentation level solution. It's not as strong as this. Here you have
we already have that.
In my mind, there is a very much places that JavaScript can throw, like say getters and setters, and these are not function calls. It seems like it can be seems like it's just a getter property of an object, but if the property is a getter or setter, then JavaScript might just throw in this way, and we have might not aware of that it might throw.
You know, one speaking of getters, right? We have these convenience functions, you know, where you just have like a square bracket operator which returns the property L value followed by like an assignment operator which performs the set, right? So in this case, I don't know how this is going to jive with this maybe solution, because you know, an exception may be thrown, you know, from that statement as well, and that statement does not look like a function call that returns a maybe, right? So we have this convenience notation for assigning property values, and I don't know how that's going to work with empty or with maybe. Right, so I'm just thinking like right. You can obviously create like a version of .set which does this, but how will you address the convenience one? Can you do a maybe version of that, or is, you know, is that going to sort of use the documentation approach? You know, so basically every time you do something like obj bracket ABC equals CDE, right, where ABC and CDE are strings, afterwards we should document that you should check if there's an exception pending, you know, because you know, DEF may not have been assigned to the ABC property of the object at all because of an exception. Currently we just kind of assume that it works.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. I remember how V8 does this. It returns like a maybe bool, right? The result of the result of the entire assignment is a maybe bool, and it gives you a compiler time warning if you don't check the value of the bool. So actually, come to think of it, Lucas, one of the things you may want to add is like if you don't perform the check, right? Like you must not ignore the return value. Like there's like a GCC. There's a GCC attribute you can add to the function that throws a warning if you don't check the return attribute, right? So that may be another thing to do, right? Like in the case of maybe value, you have to, because that's your value. But in the case of maybe bool, like for .set, you'll want to add like the attribute that throws a warning if you don't consult the return value. Because I remember V8 does that too. So anyway, yeah. Yes. So okay, so we're going the way of V8 here.
And I believe it's about the correct JavaScript handling.
Yeah. Since
JavaScript is very arbitrary in every place, and there might be exceptions in every place. And notably, this PR also fixes a very weird crash case. It's about the line 2144. 2144.
Around here?
Yeah, since you can check the context above the line. it's the
Right.
arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this is the actual function call, and there is a NAPI throw if failed assertion in 2144, and if the function call fails for the there is a JavaScript pending exceptions here. The NAPI throw if failed will assert that the action is failed, and it will throwing exceptions again while there is a pending JavaScript exception. So the program will crash for throwing at a pending exception.
Is that related to termination?
I believe the semantics here is that we can get the pending exception and clear the pending exception, but there might be some weird stuff here that we didn't clear the pending exception, but throwing again.
Yeah. I see this. I see the problem here. Yeah. So we shouldn't NAPI throw if failed. If there is a pending exception, we should throw that, and otherwise we should. So yeah, we're checking the status here indiscriminately, right? But we have to have a special case for where the status is NAPI pending exception, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe we should change NAPI throw if failed to handle this special case if it's not currently handling it. So this should.
That goes into another issue which I did want to bring up.
Yeah, that's another issue.
Which was
I didn't notice there is a issue here.
Yeah, actually, it's a PR.
Okay.
Which is, but this is related to right. So this one
there.
So this was like one about in shutdown, like because we mixed pending exception with shutdown.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's directly related to that other one that we were just talking about, but it's a little bit in that, you know, we're throwing a fatal error if you're calling when there's already a pending exception. And I think we did that on purpose because we wanted to let people know if they're basically doing something they shouldn't, right? Like, and they can get the stack trace and find, well, okay, I should actually be checking if there's a pending exception and making sure that I don't make the call if that's the case, right? But this was around, because we've mixed terminating in with pending exception, when things are terminating, you don't necessarily want to throw the fatal exception because maybe it's not useful.
Yep. Yeah. This issue of distinguishing between environment shutdown and a pending exception is coming up more and more often, and so I'm starting to think that maybe we need to make that breaking change, because it's just like we're going to have environment shutdown in a lot of places now that we have workers, and now that their adoption is growing. And so you know, we had this argument of whether this is a like, is it like it's going to be an API break with a P as in Peter, but if we implement this, it's not going to be an ABI break, because we're not technically breaking ABI. We're just adding a new status to the existing.
I think we can actually we can do it in a way that won't be breaking.
I have a way. I have an issue in the core repo where we can do this without breaking,
Right.
in a semper minor way. So basically, we give the user the opportunity during module registration or module initialization to provide a callback that will accept a status of NAPI pending exception and will return a new status of whatever they choose, if at that point. And so they may be able to handle it that way. So basically, pipe, like before you return from the NAPI call, just pipe it through the user's callback and see if they change the value of the return status, and then just hand control back to the user, and then that will give an opportunity to.
Right.
to
I even just
handle
had in mind though that we could have a new API which is like separate pending like termination. And then, you know, if you make that call, you're basically saying,
Oh, I see.
I want you to tell, I'm expecting you to give me a separate, you know, pending exception versus terminating. And if I don't
Yeah.
call that, then it doesn't change anything for, you know, so it's not breaking in that, you know, people opt in and we
Right.
just check whether they've opted in or not when we return.
And then we can point them to that API. Okay, so I wouldn't go with I wouldn't go with is terminating. I would go with is able to run JavaScript, like can run JS, and we already
Sure,
have
yeah,
that.
we can change it to whatever we want, right?
Yeah, because
that was
that'll
kind of
cover
the-
other instances where you can't
Yeah.
run JS, because in a finalizer you may not be able to
Yeah.
run JS.
Right. So basically it would let us opt in, you know, have modules opt in to better error codes. And, you know, over time, hopefully everybody just does that, right?
Yeah.
But I
Well,
was
yeah.
thinking that could be longer term. And like for this particular case, I think I figured out a way to separate them, because if you check for a pending exception and then make a call, and the exception is that there was a pending exception, that should tell you that, at least for throw, that wait a second, you know, we were actually terminating.
Oh yeah. So if you get like a chain of 2 of these pending exceptions, then that indicates termination.
Well, it's like in this case, so you know what I have on the screen here, it's like, okay, first we check, is there a pending exception? Okay, there's no pending exception. Then that means that we can go ahead. And what made me think about when we were looking at the other one is like, it basically says, if there's a pending exception, don't try and throw. We know there's a pending exception. We know that that's actually just going to say, because the preamble in throw actually says, is there already a pending exception? Yes, then don't throw a new one.
Yep.
Right, so it says like, okay, only if there's no pending exception, then we're going to try and throw. If after that throw we get a pending exception, that actually meant can't call into JS.
Yeah.
And so
That's
in this
true.
case, you know, I was thinking, so this is where I wanted to come back to, was like, in this case, are we agreed that if you try and throw an exception and we can't call into JS because we're terminating, does just doing nothing make sense?
Oh, that's a tough.
That's tricky. That's tricky.
Because that's the assertion of the original discussion, is like that we shouldn't. We throw the fatal exception in the other cases because I think what I remember was like, we do that because it's useful to find bugs in people's code.
Yeah. Yeah, but how is this different though?
Well, but in this case, it's not that the developer wrote their code in a way that, like, I think what it is, there's no way that they could have written their code to avoid this. It's because termination is a risky thing, and just like terminating a thread in mid-flight, even in JavaScript, you know, basically, I think what it says is that, you know, once you call terminate, anytime you try and call JavaScript methods, they're just going to start failing, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, but you know, these are all workarounds. I don't know if we shouldn't just bite the bullet and just have the status and then call it a day, because like we're gonna be keeping on writing these workarounds.
So
we don't.
What I was thinking is that, one, for this thing, the problem is with the status, we've then got to backport it through a number of releases, and
Yeah.
so I was thinking for like this particular issue, it might make sense to put in this workaround if we agree that like not throwing something makes sense, and then separately work on, you know, the actual API and, you know, moving it back through releases and stuff.
I don't know if the not doing anything, like doing nothing, I don't know if that's the best option. Because if you do nothing, would it just like swallow the error and then you have no idea that a problem happened at all?
Yeah, A and B, this chain of two pending exceptions is not necessarily caused by environment shutdown. Like, as we know, during GC, you can also have this, right? Where you know, like, you call a finalizer and the finalizer calls back into JavaScript, but currently JavaScript execution is unavailable and you're nowhere near environment shutdown. It's just a regular operation. And so if you do this during regular operation, you will be swallowing exceptions, right? And actually, we just learned the other day, right, that the buffer finalizer is on a set immediate to avoid precisely this issue, but finalizers for regular references are not, right? And we haven't run into this issue yet for regular references, but we may at some point, right?
Yeah, so that's the tricky part of
yeah.
this is like, is doing nothing the right answer or not?
Well, ideally, you'd put the throwing of the exception on a set immediate if you get a pending exception here, right? Because you know this pending exception is because the inability to execute JavaScript. So then, if you were going to throw an exception originally, then just throw it in a set immediate. That would be the solution. And then, you know, and then the stack unwinds, and then the exception pops up, and you will still have thrown it, but you know, you will have thrown it into an environment that is actually able to process it, right? But we don't have set immediate exposed anywhere.
Right, and would that handle termination anyway? Because like in termination,
there is no more immediate, exactly. So in termination, it would do nothing, right?
I see. Okay, so in termination, it would be okay because it just wouldn't run?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Although I don't know exactly how environment teardown handles immediates. It may just run them synchronously before terminating entirely. So I don't know, honestly.
So I guess I wanted to bring this up. So I think if people can think about it, maybe comment in it, because that's the fundamental, like, is the best thing to do nothing in this, if you can't call into JS, or is there still value in terms of like flagging errors to the user? Because that was our original reason for throwing the fatal error. And like in the termination, like the terminating threads, it seems to be you can trigger this, but not, like, it's not, you know, that fatal error will cause, so if you terminate a thread, you can cause the whole node runtime to stop. Is that what we want? Because the developer can't really avoid it in their code necessarily. Right, like if there was, so that's why we explored a little bit. Maybe we can go back and look at that some more, but it seemed like the callbacks that we have weren't necessarily going to help you be able to figure out, like, yeah, I'm in this state, I'm going to avoid throwing in the first place.
Can we, on this note, can we have a look at this one? This may be.
So sorry, just before we do that, Legendicast, did we cover? I don't want to totally have hijacked the issue we were looking at.
Yeah, we just have discussed the topics about the maybe box. So I just would like to have a quick review around the implementation, so we can decide if we are going to push forward about the maybe box.
One quick feedback at first blush about the maybe thing. Can you use variadic template arguments to not have so many overrides? Maybe you can cover all the dot calls that we currently have with like a single template function if you use like ... in the template, and then you just pass the arguments through, and then the compiler will resolve which sets of arguments will work. See, like, you don't have to have so many variations if you just have like a variadic template.
I'm not sure it will work with the variadic return value while there is nothing in the arguments. I can try, but
yeah, it might be worth trying, because we have like the various different sets of arguments, like the nav p value redshift, and then the initializer list, and then in other places we have different ones.
Yeah,
right. So
I can try by.
yeah, for the formal parameters, it may be useful.
I was even wondering if there's a way to use type defs so that we didn't have to duplicate the calls. Right, so like basically, you know, instead of having this if def with new methods, it was basically this is going to be maybe or value, right? And then
Right.
Oh, but wait a minute, because we can't. Well, wait a minute. Isn't that going to override places where it's supposed to stay value?
no,
Right?
you would have
Like,
a new type.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Which would be
Yeah,
like
yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
you know, maybe your value, and then if you've defined this, it'll be a maybe. If you don't, it's a value.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that would cut, like if we don't have to duplicate the code, I think that's better.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, you know, there's enough interest to refine a little bit, and maybe like you said you wanted to look at some of the other places, because I think if it's like we could only do it in half of them, it's not quite as interesting as if we could do them. Like if there's places it should be, but we can't do it, that might affect the decision too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But it sounds like there's enough interest that going and doing that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry then, I do want to keep a bit of time to talk about the issue we were going to get Jack to start looking at. Gabriel, you had one other one though you want to go to?
Let's talk about the one for Jack first, because we can close out with the reference
Sure.
one.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That was the one. Okay, so in here we have an issue which is test, I think. It'll be quite I'm sure we had, oh right, this one right here. So method without corresponding tests. So this is, we did take a cut quite a while back to sort of go through all of the API surface and sort of say, where do we have tests or not?
Right.
But this is going to be stale. It no longer covers all the different methods. So that, let's see, and what do we have here? What's this one? Yeah, okay, that's just related. So I think like that would be a good thing to start with, to say, update the table and add in the column that's kind of like yes, no, probably like I can see there's some things about like CPRs and stuff like that, but like something that clearly says, covered or not covered.
Okay. That
would be a good thing. And, that'll, you can try running the tests and looking at the tests and stuff like that, fill that in. And then, if you get through that, then it's like, okay, for the ones that don't have tests, starting to write some tests for the ones with gaps.
Okay.
It would be a good way to learn a bunch of the APIs.
Okay. Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. And I think, Jim, if you can send them an email, just CCing all of us.
Okay.
So he has our emails, and you can kind of send us an email saying, hey, I need some help or whatever, and we can go from there.
Okay.
And where are the tests, Michael? Are they in the same?
So now we have 2 paragraphs about test. And we need to update the issue with that PR. So take a look at the PR before starting working on something.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
it's basically what we have that already does have tests and what their PR for tests. So yeah,
we have 2 PR, the 928 and 923. Okay, that add some tests, and so just pay attention to not cover the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense. And then to Jim's question, like they're here in the test subdirectory, where you have and there's some in the subdirectories and stuff too.
Okay.
Is that good, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, thank you.
Okay, good. So then the last thing we want to try and squeeze in was discussion of, do you have the issue or pull request, Gabriel, number?
Yeah,
Which
got it. Hold on.
is it a PR or issue?
It's a PR.
Okay.
And it is in the chat. It's 37616.
37616. Okay.
Yep, this is the one.
Right.
So, yeah, might as well go straight to the code, I think.
Okay. You're very quiet now. If you, I don't know if what you changed.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I moved the mic up. Okay, so there are two things here. The first one is this top hunk.
Yep.
This I think is safer in general, no matter what, to empty out the objects or the instance copy of the finalizer pointer and just call then, because this would make 100,000% sure that we're not calling into the user's finalizer twice. So I think that's a good one. Now down here, this is something we should be doing because although in newer versions of Node we can't call JavaScript during environment teardown, in older versions of Node we can, like in 14, I think. Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong. I think in 14 you can still call into JavaScript during environment teardown, which means that as soon as you're executing any kind of JavaScript, it is possible that you're going to launch a GC. And so if you keep the weak callback attached to the JavaScript object, then V8 may end up calling the weak callback, and so you're going to end up in finalize. You're going to re-enter finalize. So you've entered finalize from environment teardown, right? Then you execute some JavaScript, then the GC will run and it'll enter finalize from GC, right? And then that'll cause a double free. So if you clear the weak before executing the finalize, then that will not happen. And so, because basically what we're saying is, okay, it's environment teardown. The destructor for NAPI env is responsible for running all the finalizers. So GC, stay out of the way, right? Like we are now running the finalizer, not the GC, because the GC may or may not run it. Depends on the GC, but we have to run the finalizer no matter what. So by doing the clear weak here, we're basically assuming responsibility for executing the finalizer and explicitly revoking that responsibility from the engine.
So clear weak. Okay, so that's basically okay. It's not saying it's now can be cleared, but it's basically saying, yeah, okay, getting rid of the reference, right?
Basically, yeah, it's like we're doing the finalizer, so stay out of the way, basically. Because
Yeah,
we're already
clear.
inside finalize. We're already inside finalize, right? So there's no point in re-entering finalize for any reason. And,
Yeah.
and if we don't clear weak, it would.
And it, like this, so the two questions, so like basically, is this, if we did this in the previous releases, would it add some functionality we can then no longer support in later releases?
No, it would be a bug fix, pure and simple.
For earlier versions?
Yes, it would do nothing.
It would be a bug fix for earlier versions that that can't exist in the later versions. Yeah,
because you cannot call back into JS anymore. Yeah. And then of course that whole pending exception thing pops up, but that's a different discussion. But anyway, there is one caveat, and I put that in the comment. So currently calling, as far as I can tell, calling clear weak is a guarantee that the weak callback will not be called. But we're basically trusting the engine that a call to clear weak will remove even a pending finalizer. So if the finalizer is already queued to run, by calling clear weak, we are requesting that the finalizer be removed from the queue, but the engine may or may not heed that request, right? So
I
do we
doubt
trust
that it does?
Well, it does fix it for older versions. It no longer re-enters if we do a clear weak. So I've tested that fix, and
even
it
if
works.
it's already pending?
As far as I can tell, yes.
So my two thoughts are that since you say that we are relying on the engine's behavior with this clear weak fix, it may be possible that that engine behavior would change in the future.
Yeah.
Whereas with your second fix using that flag, I think in the comment, if you scroll down a bit, in this one here,
yeah, a little higher.
Up.
Sorry.
Yes, this comment.
Yeah, right here, right here.
Using this one, we explicitly have control over whether we called finalize or whether we should do this finalize method or not.
Yeah.
I think that is a little more safer because it's not relying on the black box of the engine.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. Blue engines or not. We are built on top of the engine, and if we are not believing it, lots of our code will have a lot of extra works to do. So if we believe it's a engine work we have to fix, I believe we have to work with the engine, but not wrapping around it.
Okay.
And besides, if the engine ever changes its mind and no longer DQs, then we have this solution in the wings. So,
but from what you're saying, it doesn't matter anyway because it's not needed for newer versions because you can't call.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah. It's not likely that we're gonna backport misbehaving engine versions to older versions anymore anyway. So yeah, this solution is probably good enough because it's going out of style anyway, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and it seems it's lower risk in terms of change, maybe.
Yeah. Because we are putting it in master, and we're going to have yet another flag, and we already have like 3 different flags which we're dancing around.
Right. Yeah.
You know. So I think maybe we should just keep it like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is basically saying, okay, so if you can just help me since I wasn't there the last time.
Yeah.
This is in the finalize of what?
Basically the finalize that we have currently on master is only in ref base, right? But there are some things we need to do in reference as well. So I add an override to reference because reference is the only one that has access to the underscore persistent, right? So I add an override inside reference, and then at the end I chain up because we need to do something inside reference before we start doing the stuff inside ref base. So that's why it's a chain up because I don't have access to the underscore persistence inside ref base.
Did the chain up already have an env teardown?
So yes. The env teardown has been there since env teardown.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
right. So finalizing the reference, we want to say, okay, GC, don't do anything for us.
Exactly. We're already doing your work.
Okay.
It's just to throw some thoughts out there. Do we need to be worried about other engines like Chakra or JerryScript?
No, because they have a completely different implementation of reference handling. This code only applies to V8.
And that's the JS native API V8. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
it is scope to that, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is there any case where, okay, the reference is being finalized and that's because this other logic that we have that basically says like defer or don't defer. So we're actually like deleting this thing completely, right?
Yeah. We were having an unexpected reentrancy, which it would have been like defer twice otherwise, and okay, that's just pushing it too far, right? We'd have to defer twice if we wanted to let the second reentrancy, this unexpected GC reentrancy, if we wanted to let that proceed, then we need a flag to defer again, and that's just nuts.
Right. So this just makes sure that we don't get the next one. We're just gonna say, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, if you look at it in a certain way, during environment teardown, we're sort of shearing the reference apart. On the one hand, we're setting the ref count to 0 artificially, making it weak, and on the other hand, we're clearing the weak callback from the engine strong. So during environment teardown, the reference just sort of explodes. It's both weak and strong at the same time. We're like entering quantum territory here. So, you know, you can look at it from this really weird perspective, because clear weak is something we normally do when we strengthen the reference, right? But on the other hand, we're setting the ref count to 0, meaning we want to weaken the reference.
Right.
But we have to do it because we have to ensure that the finalize happens for exactly one reason, which is environment teardown. And we set the ref count to 0 so that we get this deferring behavior, and we clear the weak callback so that we avoid this unexpected GC intrusion during finalization.
Right, and we don't know that, like, where we're setting it. Where is the part where that has?
It's 278 line.
Right here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, the ref count equals 0. Yeah, and we need this. We need this so that so that the deferring behavior happens correctly.
Right, because it's only
Even
later
during
on
teardown.
that we. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, so we only do this weird stuff during teardown. So all these conditions are predicated on isenv teardown.
I was just wondering if, like, in this line, if that's where the clear weak could be done.
Yes, it would be done there if I had access to it. But this is in the base class, right? And the clear weak. So the clear weak is done there basically. The pseudocode would be on line 277. It would be if isenv teardown.
Oh, yeah, I see it. Right. Yeah,
right.
Okay. Right.
But
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
okay, understood. Because okay, so you're doing it in the finalize, which runs just before this.
Exactly. Yes, and then the chain up causes this line that you highlighted to execute right away.
And actually, that should be safe because we clear the weak before we set the ref count to 0.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when we introduced this line that you highlighted, we basically missed a step, which is to tell the garbage collector to back off, because we thought it's not going to happen because it's environment teardown, but Lucas found an instance where it does happen, and so now we need to fix this misstep by also removing the clear weak, and of course only on older versions.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that now makes some sense. Have to delete this reference of the code in this function. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Does that fix the intermittent failures we've been seeing in the Node add-on API tests?
I don't know, honestly. I haven't tested that far. Okay. But
I was just curious if it actually would help resolve, because we've been seeing like some intermittence at the end of the test. It's like occasionally you see the blew up, right?
Yeah. Well, there's only one way to find out. Yep. I think just to merge this and then see what it does in the other repo.
Their backtrace are very similar, right? So we just can land that PR and see what happens again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. So the only thing that might be handy is to add a little bit to this comment at 273.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Right, just to say that, there's actually like, the tie between this finalized code and this thing, right? So if I'm reading this, you might say that, sure that there's no GC that will happen afterwards because the finalizer, which is called is called.
Yeah. Call attention to the override, which is just below. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll do. Okay. So I'll change that comment and then it should be good to go.
Okay. Because it would be good to get this landed and then see if it fixes the other issue. Because I was hoping it was otherwise. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Can do.
Okay. Well, we're well over. So thanks for everybody for taking the time. Unless there's something we need to talk about before we close out for today. If not, well, thanks for everybody for taking the time, and we'll see you in GitHub and between now and next week.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.
Yep.